Fantasy Source Football Podcast. My name is David A. Arnott, standing here with Brad Pinkerton, and it was an eventful week in the National Football League, especially for injuries to people in the offensive backfield. Let's start with probably the most surprising one, a guy who people didn't really seem to understand had been injured until a couple days after it happened. Matt Schaub, done for the year for the Texans. A lot of people are saying, Matt Leinart might not have been all that bad when he was in Arizona. What's the difference going to be? Other people are saying he was terrible. And you know what? He's not going to be able to do the things that Schaub did. What do you see, Brad, changing for the Texans moving forward?
Well, the biggest change for the Texans offense is going to be just a increased emphasis on the run. And they've already been pretty run heavy, and I think we're going to see that even more, which doesn't necessarily mean more of a workload for Arian Foster, who's already getting his fair share, but it means Ben Tate maybe steps up and plays a little more, a few more carries to help keep Foster's and the entire backfield healthy down the stretch.
Now, are you envisioning this something like vintage Carolina Panthers with D'Angelo Williams and Jonathan Stewart, both being fantasy relevant and, fantasy starting relevant running backs?
That's the best case scenario, but I think that's what fantasy owners should be hoping to see, and it's very possible with those two because Ben Tate is extremely talented, and he's going to get a chance to showcase that.
Now, Andre Johnson coming back from injury, we already have concerns about that because, a receiver coming back from some sort of lower body injury, you always worry about how good he's going to be right away. Do you think that the Leinart change will have some sort of effect on his effectiveness?
Yeah, now you have to worry about not only re-injury, but a new quarterback and, increased focus on the run. So those owners who are trying to be sneaky and grab Andre when he first got hurt at a discount, they may end up regretting that decision. We're not going to see Andre Johnson-type numbers down the stretch. You can't expect that. But he's still Andre Johnson. He's going to get in the end zone quite a few times, and he's going to put up some decent yardage totals. So, I'm not hating him. I'm just downgrading him a little bit. I don't know if I would count him in the maybe top 10 wide receivers going into the fantasy playoffs.
But just not one of the top 3 guys that we expected at the beginning of the year.
Right.
Now, another quarterback that played through an injury and now is a little bit up in the air, although he's very likely to play at some point again during the season. Michael Vick says they say that he has broken ribs. Vince Young has been a decent quarterback in recent years. How do you see that playing out? And if you're a Vick owner, what do you have to worry about? Are you at all considering benching him, first of all? And then the second part, how does that affect the other Eagles?
Well, I am a Vick owner, so I can speak from my perspective this weekend. I will be adding Vince Young most likely. Depends on who else is on the waiver wire. I haven't gotten that far yet. But Vince Young will definitely be there just in case as an emergency play. And he can add, decent rushing stats, and he's still got the same weapons that Vick would have, although Macklin may or may not be on the field this weekend. That's going to be definitely part of my decision of whether to even start Young. But really, we have to expect Vick to play since he suffered the injury very early in the game, made it all the way through. In fact, the Eagles didn't even know he was hurt until after the game. And we've seen Tony Romo play with a protective flak jacket with the same type injury. And he seemed to do all right with a few pain-killing injections, so that might be the course of action for Vick. And if he's still on the field, I've got to play him.
What about guys like LaShawn McCoy and Deshaun Jackson? Jackson, of course, being benched last week due to missing a meeting, a special teams meeting, no less, and a lot of speculation is that he was making a statement with it. But LaShawn McCoy seems to be, his success, some might argue, is kind of predicated on Vick's ability to run out of the pocket. And if he doesn't have that, if he doesn't have quite the ability to go deep as much as possible, what do you see for him?
McCoy is still a stud, no matter what. Let's just go ahead and say that. But yes, his value skyrocketed because of Vick's ability, and that's, often our defenses have to focus on Vick out of the backfield, not necessarily LaShawn. Now they can key on LaShawn McCoy. So that's definitely going to challenge him. I think he'll overcome it. I think he'll be just fine. Going back to Deshaun, he's got his own sets of issues already, and now you're talking about, well, maybe Vince Young is the quarterback, but all the Eagles have to do is put the ball in Deshaun's hands and let him do the rest. So as long as they can accomplish that goal, whether it's screens, handoffs out of the backfield, end arounds, whatever it might be, they just need to let Deshaun make plays. Fantasy owners should bank on them doing that.
While we're on the topic of Deshaun, given the season that he's had, do you see him still as a wide receiver 1 in standard leagues? Point per reception leads doesn't really add that much value to begin with, but in most leagues, you still see him as a wide receiver 1. And depending on that, how much do you downgrade him if Vince Young plays?
I see him as a wide receiver 1 talent-wise. Attitude-wise, no, because right now he doesn't have the incentive, or at least in his mind, he doesn't have any incentive to go out there and play hard and to go over the middle, stick his hands out, catch a ball, and get hit. He's only interested in catching the ball if he's streaking down the field and has separation from the defender where he can't really get tackled. And this is just my personal opinion, but he's not playing hard because he wants to stay healthy. He doesn't want to get hurt and then lose out on that big money contract. So he needs to start thinking of it a different way maybe, and that he needs to go out there and make big plays and prove that he can go over the middle and be a team player so he can get that money.
Bouncing off of that to another team, there's a guy who's in a backfield, a quarterback, that a lot of people have been wondering if he's eventually going to get hurt and thus mess up the entire offensive system that's been installed. I'm talking, of course, about the Denver Broncos and the very, I guess you could say, innovative way that they've decided to deploy Tim Tebow in that backfield. It's benefited Tebow's fantasy owners. He's doing a very good job. I would say he's been fantasy starter worthy in the past few weeks. And better yet for owners of Denver Broncos players, those running backs are going crazy.
Yep, you have to give John Fox a little bit of credit for installing a read option system that's going to play to his quarterback's strengths and cover up the deficiencies. But, ironically, he's being creative by not being creative. Essentially, so all we're going to see is runs from the Broncos from here on out. So forget about Tebow throwing the ball, double-digit times even. 20-plus attempts is out of the question at this point. So I think fantasy owners need to move away from any Broncos receivers.
So Eric Decker, done.
I'm going to go ahead and predict that he's done. I don't know if I would drop him immediately because maybe the Broncos aren't committed long-term to Tebow. We're going to see, but he's doing well. They're winning. I got a feeling this is what we're going to see for the rest of the year. Eddie Royal, Demaryius Thomas, Eric Decker, sorry, guys.
But the running backs now, we've got some interesting injury situations. No Sean Moreno, done for the year. Drop him if you still have him for some reason. Willis McGahee has a couple of different ailments bothering him. Might not play this weekend. Apparently it seems to be he's day-to-day. And then, of course, Lance Ball. Lance Ball, he came in and did an exceptionally good job for them.
Lance Ball is a very underwhelming talent. He's a replacement-level talent, as they say. But we saw him get 30 carries last week. Turn that into 96 yards, which is respectable. But 30 carries is nothing you want to overlook. And worst-case scenario, Lance Ball comes into this weekend's game, or this Thursday night's game, as the backup running back to a injured starter if McGahee does indeed return. And in that run-heavy or run-only offense now, you're talking about possibly 15 carries from a backup. And fantasy owners need to pay attention to that because Lance Ball, not only could he be getting significant carries as a backup, he could be the starter again.
Given that Ball probably was not owned going into this week, is he the number one pickup of the week?
It's a very down week for pickups, especially if, like Denarius Moore, Vincent Brown, if those guys were already picked up after last Thursday night's game. Then it's very thin, especially on running backs. There's not a lot of great running back pickups out there, so Lance Ball needs to be high on lists.
Couple more injury situations to keep an eye on. Frank Gore, we all know his history. He's got, if I recall correctly, 2 reconstructed knees, 2 reconstructed shoulders, and I believe he's only played 16 games once in his entire career, and now the 49ers decide to go on a run-heavy offense. What's his situation?
Yeah, let's not forget that hip surgery that ended last year.
Let's not even forget about that.
Yeah, it's there's definitely another reminder this week with Gore suffering what they're calling a bruised knee, but it was enough to limit him to only
That's
6.
Nice and vague.
Exactly. Well, it only limited him to 6 carries last week, so got to think it's maybe a little more serious than just a boo-boo on his knee. But just another warning signal for you to pick up Kendall Hunter if you're relying on Gore down the stretch.
And then the other somewhat interesting injury news to keep an eye on, Julio Jones, rookie wide receiver who's been fantasy relevant and a very interesting flyer pickup that has paid dividends. He went out. Harry Douglas, of all people, had a big game.
A big second half. 13 of his 14 targets after halftime. And that was with Julio out of the game with another hamstring injury. So he's definitely established himself as a potential fantasy stud. There's no doubting that. But he's also taken on the injury-prone label really early in his career. Now it's too early to label him that for the rest of his career, but that's where he's heading right now. I don't know how much fantasy owners are going to be able to rely on him down the stretch. It's risky to say Harry Douglas is going to be like a handcuff for Julio Jones that you can just plug in and forget about. because he is a deep threat, boomer bust kind of guy. So even though he had a great game this past week, he saw a ton of targets, ideal situation. I don't know if he's going to be able to repeat that.
Wait, you're saying that Harry Douglas is not the overwhelming talent just waiting to burst out?
Hey, I don't want you to get angry and start yelling at me. All I'm saying is Harry Douglas may or may not have another good game for the rest of the year. He's got some talent, he's got some ability, but I think he's going to be very hit or miss.
So act with caution when it comes to Harry
exactly.
Douglas.
And just keep your emotions under control when talking about Harry Douglas.
All right, Brad, thanks for joining us.
Thanks a lot, David.